What if I told you that Canada is on the verge of passing Islamic blasphemy laws at the federal level? Well, you better believe it, because right now, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is proceeding at breakneck pace to address unproven increases of Islamophobia, and he's going to do it by curbing your right to free speech. Your constitutional right to free speech is at risk, and Canadian law is about to become Sharia compliant. Let that sink in. And yet, not a single mainstream media news organization is reporting on the state-sanctioned assault on your most precious freedom. Now, some background. So, the government's anti-Islamophobia initiative began in the form of a seemingly innocuous online petition presented to Canada's House of Commons. Citing no evidence whatsoever, the petition made a really bold claim that Islamic terrorism has been used as a pretext for a, quote, notable rise of anti-Muslim sentiment across Canada. The petition called upon the House of Commons to recognize that terrorists are not real Muslims by condemning all forms of so-called Islamophobia with no exact definition of what they meant by that term. That request, with no evidence, not a single case of Islamophobia cited, virtually no public input, and zero attention from the mainstream media, it received unanimous consent by all of Canadian MPs. But it doesn't end there. The petition was followed in rapid-fire fashion by a second motion, sponsored by Liberal MP Iqra Khalid, which incredibly called for the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage to produce findings and recommendations within 240 calendar days of the motion's acceptance. Titled Systemic Racism and Religious Discrimination, the motion, M103, demands that the government not only condemn Islamophobia, whatever that means, in word, but that it also develops a whole-of-government approach to reducing or eliminating Islamophobia. And so it's anticipated that legislative remedies, legal options, will be front and center in the committee's efforts going forward. In short, the Canadian government is preparing to silence anyone who dares to criticize Islam. Their anti-Islamophobia motion, which will in all likelihood be voted on during this parliamentary session, well, it resembles a kind of blasphemy law in favor of one preferred religion above all the others. If this motion passes, Canadians can be persecuted for expressing any criticism of Islam, even if it's valid and warranted. However, I'm not about to let the government take away my free speech because of some trumped-up term designed to further their agenda of political correctness and, frankly, Islamic supremacy. Newsflash, this unfounded anti-Islamophobia legislation flies in the face of our Constitution and its embedded Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Sharia law and its related speech codes are not a reasonable limit on my freedoms. Innumerable men and women, much braver than I, did not pay the ultimate sacrifice so Islamic laws would someday supersede our fundamental and guaranteed freedoms of thought, freedoms of belief, opinion, and expression. If I want to point out the fact that Muhammad married a 6-year-old and slept with a 9-year-old, if I want to depict him in a cartoon, or if I think that women ought to be viewed as equal to men in the eyes of the law, and that striking at the necks and arms of unbelievers is draconian and downright antithetical to Canadian values, well, it's my damn well right to do so. You might not like it, and you are free to disagree with me. You're free to use your own rights and freedoms to form arguments, perhaps some even more convincing than mine in this country. You can even tell me to shut up, but under no circumstances should the government compel me to shut up. That's because, according to our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we're all equal. Every individual, not a belief system or ideology, every individual is equal before and under the law. We all have equal protections and benefit equally from the law. This might shock you, but Muslims do not get special treatment or protections. So here's what I want you to do. When Parliament was dismissed for Christmas break, the relevant motion, M103, was pushed back and is presently on the order paper. And so we have a very small window of opportunity to affect things before our freedoms are frankly snatched from us for the sake of political correctness and Sharia creep. I want you to go to freedomtooffend.com. I want you to join me in demanding that this motion be rescinded and exposed for what it really is, a blatant attack on our free speech, and so an assault on the very cornerstone of our Canadian democracy. I want you to stand with me in telling this Liberal government that it is in the public interest to allow all Canadians to freely discuss Islam as we would any other religious belief system, without fear of recrimination or persecution by law. And I actually want to go one step further. I want to demand that our legislators roundly denounce any further so-called Islamophobia initiative as antithetical to our Canadian values, and so to vote them down in defense of our inherent and fundamental right to free speech. The government is not going to proactively ask for your opinion or let you have your say before they vote on this motion. And considering that they voted unanimously in support of the petition that started the Sharia creep in our federal legislature, well, there's a damn good chance that this thing will pass. That is, of course, unless we make our voices heard. Go to freedomtooffend.com and remind your MP that this is Canada, a country in which mosque and state will remain separate. For the Rebel.media, I'm Faith Goldie. Folks, the petition that got this all started had 70,000 signatures. I want to beat that. I want to have 100,000 signatures on our petition. That's more than any other Rebel petition. Please share this with your friends.